Hello, welcome to Backyard Wellness, a show which tries to help bring you healthy options from the region, community, and even your own backyard. And today I have with me Lora Krall, and we're going to talk about Potawatomi herbal medicine. She is a woman who has many hats, and I'm going to read this because I didn't memorize it. She's a nurse herbalist, an educator, gardener, writer, and a proud mom. As a nurse herbalist, her goal is to educate people on how to work with herbal medicines while bridging gaps in allopathic home care. She is published in the Rosemary Glad Stars, Firesiders, Zesty Recipes for Health Boosting Remedies. She's been a recipe tester for Rosalie Delefau's Forest Wild Remedies, and has been a contributor to the United Plant Savers Journal and Essential Inkling Journal, and is a past contributor to the Herbal Living magazine blog. She has spoken at many local and regional herbal conferences and will be discussing herbal pharmaceutical interactions at the American Herbalist Guild National Conference this October. Lora is a teaching assistant and administrator staff member for Rosemary Gladstar's Science and Art of Herbalism course. Finally, it is through Earl Meshgard, her Potawatomi elders' permission, that she's able to share some of her teachings from the Potawatomi traditions today. So, welcome, Lora.
Thank you.
So glad you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is exciting because I've known Lora for a while, but we've never talked about Potawatomi herbal medicine, so yay! Well, Lora, you and I both have experience being nurses working with pharmaceuticals. What drew you to herbalism?
Oh, I have to say probably about the third year I was at a nursing school, I realized that there had to be something better than just pharmaceuticals. At the time I was working in intensive care, and we would have people in multiple complex situations, and the only thing we could do was either give them a back rub, give them a bath, or give them a medicine and sedate them. And I just felt like there was something more. And that was back in the late 80s, early 90s. And just then the alternative, quote unquote, medicine movement was beginning. And I started doing some research along with some people in my unit, and we started using essential oils, which come from plants. And that was one of my very first beginnings of it. And that's how it kind of wove into my career, because I really felt like there was more to it. So, and the farther I dove into it, the more I realized that, yeah, there's a lot there. I have to credit a patient I took care of in Greenville, South Carolina, when I lived down there, with really getting me started deeply into herbalism. She came into the emergency room and she had a urinary tract infection, and I gave her prescription and told her how to use it and what things to look for. And she said, well, I'm going to go see Dr. Feelgood. I don't need this. And I was like, what is a Dr. Feelgood? And she said, oh, he's man down there at the swap meet. You go down there and look at him. And I was like, oh my gosh, here we are back in herbal medicine of the hills. So of course I went down to the swap meet, and there was this man who had a wagon, like an old gypsy wagon, and all these drawers. And people were in line. I bet you it was half a block long. So I get in line and I get up to him, and he says, look at me. Stick out your tongue. And he said, what's bothering you? What's ailing you? And I said, well, I have a lot of trouble with sinus headaches. So he goes over to the cupboard and he kind of shakes his head, and he pulls out these drawers and he puts plant material in a bag and he gives it to me. He said, yeah, drink that and you'll feel better. And I was like, oh my gosh. And people actually come here instead of going to the hospital for pharmaceuticals. I'm like, I am blown away by this. Wow. So I went home and I made the tea. It was absolutely the worst tasting thing I have ever had, but I got better.
Wow.
And that was it. And then the next week, a friend of mine named Ginger, was having a class where a lady named Rosemary was teaching. And so I went to the class, and the first time I met Rosemary, she was sitting behind a huge rosemary bush. And I looked at her and I thought, oh my God, this woman eats weeds and she looks that good. Sign me up. And that was it. That was back in 1998.
Wow.
And I've been doing herbalism ever since.
Huh. So you've had good experience with it.
Yeah. Yes, very much so.
What would you say the difference between herbalism and pharmaceuticals is?
I get that question a lot. Basically, a pharmaceutical is an active constituent within a plant, because many of our pharmaceutical agents are actually derived from plant medicines. They extract the active constituent, put it into a form to give as a prescription. An herbal product is usually whole plant or part of a plant, and it's made in a variety of different preparations. You can use it as a tea, a tincture, a rub, a lotion, a lot of different ways. And the main difference is that most herbal medicines have the whole plant involved. And there are chemicals within the plant that help protect it and make it more bioavailable for us, whereas in a pharmaceutical agent, you still have that active constituent, but there aren't all the protective mechanisms that are in a full plant.
They've got a lot of inert
Yes.
ingredients to help it happen.
And it's designed to help the pharmaceutical absorb into the system, work in specific areas or not. There's a whole chemistry behind it, and that's not my expertise, but it is designed to be more specific. And there are definitely times where you need a pharmaceutical agent.
Sure.
It's not, everybody thinks it's an either or, and that's not how it's meant to be used. You work with these systems to what is best for you. And that's one of the things that I try and teach people. It's not, oh, I just need an herb and it'll get better, or, oh, I just take a pharmaceutical, those herbs are all junk. That's not the way it is. It works much more multi-layered and in-depth than that. And I would say if I had to differentiate between allopathic medicine and herbal medicine, allopathic medicine means basically you're treating something outside of yourself. So a pharmaceutical is something that is made outside of you, and you take that. Versus an herbal product, it's also outside of you, but what plants have that's magic about them is that when they're alive, they breathe off oxygen. And what we breathe in is from them, and what we breathe out, CO2, is what they need. So it's more of a symbiotic relationship. I think that there is a place for both allopathic and herbal medicine. And my background is primarily in critical care emergency medicine. And I was a flight nurse for a period of time. And I'm sorry, if I'm in a car accident, I don't want an herbalist. I want a trauma doc to fix me. But I also want an herbalist there to help me heal faster, to build up my system so I have reserve to heal. And there is a place for both. There is a place for both.
So that's how it could work synergistically.
Right, yes.
Wow. Well, you've been studying Potawatomi traditions. Can you tell a little bit about Potawatomi, the tribe itself? Where did it come from, and where were they originally? Okay.
The Potawatomi are a group from what is known as the Three Fires Council. They consist of the Ojibwa, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi people. And at one point in history, these bands fought between each other, and they decided to come together. All their languages were fairly close to one another, and they created the Three Fires Council. And they were primarily located in the Lake Ontario, Canada, Great Lakes area, some into New York as I understood it. And as colonialization happened, these tribes would migrate, And the Potawatomi were dispersed specifically down into the Michigan area. And then in 1835, I believe, there was the Treaty of Chicago that disbanded the Potawatomi people, and they were dispersed. There was a phenomenon called the Trail of Death, in which the Potawatomi people were marched, like the Trail of Tears, not well known, out of their tribal lands. There are different bands of the Potawatomi people. Some are down in Kansas, some are in Iowa and Illinois, there's some in Milwaukee. The elder that I work with, Earl Mishagad, is part of a group of Native people who chose not to go on the Trail of Death, and they escaped and lived with the Menominee Indian people, and they stayed in their tribal lands of the UP of Michigan.
My goodness, I wonder how that could have happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard of the Cherokee hiding in the mountains of North Carolina, so not all the Cherokee came out
Right.
on the Trail of Tears, but
Right.
I mean, such courage for people not to join in. And
Yeah. Yeah.
wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that even happened.
Yeah.
Don't hear that in our school in history.
No, there's a lot
You
that
might hear you might hear about the Trail of Tears, but
not the Trail of Death.
no.
Yeah.
No.
Part of our ugly history. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, but how did you get into Potawatomi herbalism?
I actually have to go back. When I was a nurse, I was doing holistic health classes, and I taught a class at Waniwak Spiritualist Camp in Wisconsin. And there was a lady that was my neighbor. She was sitting on a bench next to me one day, full dress regalia. And she said, "Oh, you're my neighbor. Come sit by me." So I went over, and she pulled up her skirt, and she had a pair of men's underwear on, and she had her smokes stuck in the front of her pocket because that's where she kept her smokes. And she was just a very colorful lady, and she actually was the first one to introduce me to herbal medicine in Native tradition. And she picked up a plantain leaf and showed it to me, and she said, "This is medicine. If you get a bug bite, you just put it on there and it helps." And she said at the end of the weekend that we worked together, I went to my first talking circle. I didn't know what that was. She invited me to a gathering. I had no idea what she was talking about, but my family went. I was unable to go, and they came back and said, "You have to go." And after that, I started going to gatherings and meeting people. And over the years, Pinky, also known as Black Hawk Woman, and her husband took us in as family. One of the elders that came to teach at the gatherings was Earl Mishagad. And that's where I met Earl, and he taught Potawatomi ways. Pinky was Cherokee and Irish, but because she did not know anybody who followed her traditions as a Cherokee, she followed the Potawatomi people. And that's where I was introduced to the Potawatomi medicine ways. So.
All very circuitous, but yet it has a thread.
It does. It does indeed. Yes.
Wow. So, okay, so we've kind of touched on Potawatomi herbalism, but or herbalism, but Potawatomi herbalism is plants. And what else? Is there
I'd have to.
Another combination?
There is no such thing as Potawatomi, quote, herbalism.
Okay.
There are plants that you work with as part of your medicine. In Native culture, as I was taught, medicine ways are about lifestyle and diet and what you do in your life, how you contribute to your community, as much as working with a plant when you don't feel good. It's all of it in one. It's how you live your life is a medicine. And plants are considered part of your relations. Like, you would be my friend, these plants are my friends. And when I need something, I would come to you and say, "Lois, could you help me with something? And I'll cut your grass for you." I do the same thing with the plants. I come to them and I say, "Can you help me?" And I leave them a tobacco offering. and then they come and they help me.
So we should call it more Native American herbalism, or not, or just plain herbalism and let it be that way?
I think there are basically 4 different types of herbalism, or different paths you can follow. There is Western herbalism, which is kind of a mishmash of all kinds of herbalism. You can be Chinese, you could be Native American, you could be Ayurvedic, and those would all be part of the Western model. You could be Native American herbalism, and you only practice native culture. You could be Ayurvedic and only practice that, or traditional Chinese medicine. Those are the 4 biggies. There are others, but that's kind of how they're subdivided. And I practice myself Western herbalism, so I include some of my European heritage as a German and as an Irish woman, as well as Native American traditions that I was taught. I can't prove that I'm Native. There are many people who follow Native ways that are not Native. And my elder Earl believes in Rainbow Tribe, which means if you have a good heart and you are willing to walk Native way, then it doesn't matter what your traditions are or where you come from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, you brought some plants, some samples here. Can you give some examples of some of this medicine?
Sure. I'm going to start out with my first one. We know this is plantain. It's also called Plantago major because the leaves are bigger. In Potawatomi, this is Zeshko, Ojawan Guk, Gishke. And this plant is used to help with bug bites. It's wonderful. You just take a leaf and you chew it up and you make a poultice, and then you put it on where the bug bite is and it takes the sting out. Its main property is that it's astringent, so it pulls things out. In Native tradition, you would use this a lot for pulling out infection and wounds. If you got bit by a spider or a snake or something, you may use this to pull out the poisons. It's also a survival food. In this smaller phase, when the leaves are softer, you can eat this, and it has a lot of nutritional value. When the leaves get bigger and kind of tough, they're not as good to eat. You could steam them as a pot herb, but this you can eat when it's small like this. These little seed pods at the top are psyllium seeds, and this is what Metamucil is made out of, is these psyllium seeds. And so if you dry these, you can make your own Metamucil.
Help your microbiome.
There you go. But this
doesn't look that powerful.
It's beautiful. It's just you will hear this also called white man's footprint, because the Native people would see this wherever white man would come. It came from Europe. There is a native variety of plantain that we have here in our region. It's called Plantago rugaelia, and that's the native version. And it looks similar to this. It has a few different features, but we do have this as a native plant as well.
Has a little bit of more reddish vein?
Yes, I think so. Okay.
Because I've never seen one have the psyllium on such a small plant. I've usually seen it on a much, much bigger plant.
Well, and you have to remember, this year we have had lots of rain. So the plants are way ahead of what their normal schedule is because of that. So I just harvested this little plant today, and it is way ahead.
Yeah.
Way ahead of what it should be. So for what our usual climate is.
Wow.
Another plant that we use a lot of is called gishke. And this is cedar. Cedar is a woman's medicine. And I was taught by my teacher, Pinky.
Smells good.
It is. It's just heavenly. To make a salve with this. And because I make medicines with this plant, I can never burn this plant. That is the tradition I was taught. So if I was in ceremonies and I went to speak, you give an offering to the fire to speak, and then some man would put this cedar in the fire for you. That's tradition. It's to honor this plant. So women don't usually burn this. This is an amazing plant. When the explorers came through the Great Lakes, one of the things they did, they had scurvy. And this was the plant they used. It's very high in vitamin C that help cure scurvy.
Goodness.
Yep. This is one of my favorite plants. This is called Menashkuk or bee balm. And bee balm is also a respiratory plant. It has a peppery flavor to it. The flowers are very peppery. You can put those on a salad, and it can be very stimulating. It's in the mint family. This is a plant that they would use not just for respiratory issues,
Oh yeah, it's real peppery.
but you could also do this in a sweat lodge. This is part of the medicine tea that goes in a sweat lodge, and this tea will help you both physically if you have respiratory issues, but it's also a stimulant for the lodge. In Lakota traditions, which I do not follow, my elder told me this is known as Lakota love medicine. And the Lakota people would give this to, a young man would give this to a woman as a gesture of love. They would give these plants. And these are very fragrant. They're wonderful pollinators. They're easy to grow. My patch is as big as my shoulders.
And that little snippet
Yep.
that she gave me covered my whole tongue. It's
It was beautiful.
It's pepper,
Yep.
very peppery.
And this one is called Zigwek, and this is white pine.
It's pretty.
And we use the fronds of this as a tea also. This has lots of vitamin C in it as well. You can use the pitch of this, or the big quick, or the pitch. This will be used on wounds. You can make it into a salve. It closes things. They also used it on canoes to seal the canoe. This plant is easy to remember because white pine, white has 5 letters in it. There are 5 fronds that come with this, so that's an easy way to remember white pine. And then the last one I have to show you is the sacred plant of the Potawatomi people and many native cultures, and that is just tobacco. And this is Nicotina rustica, and this plant dried is the same plant that many people will smoke. The difference between this tobacco is that it's harvested differently than what we do for cigarettes.
This smells sweet too.
Yes. It is also used only in ceremony. You would never see a native person just pull out a pipe and start smoking this tobacco without having a prayerful intention behind it. So for example, if I was going to ask these plants to come and be a part of my teaching today, I would give this as an exchange for them. So this is known in Potawatomi as sema. And so you will always give a tobacco offering when you are going to work with a plant. Or if I would go to my elder and ask him, can I talk about these ways? I give him tobacco and say, can I do that? It's about exchange and being equal and balanced. And a lot of people misinterpret that and see it as, how do I want to say, one-sided. That you just go up and you take these plants, and that's not the way it is at all. There is always an equal exchange.
So it's being mindful of the circle of life and
Yes.
everything.
Yes, definitely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh boy. It's
So,
a philosophy that I think we need to be a little more attuned to,
yeah.
that what we take, we give back and work with it. Yeah, that's amazing. And it's right there in the herbalism.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's in the medicine of the Native people and how they have lived their life for many, many, many cultures before their land was taken over by white people and colonized. And I'm a patriot. My ancestors came over on the Mayflower, so I'm a part of that as well. And so it's about bringing balance back to the world, not just take. We've done that long enough. Now it's time to give. And so part of my work with these plants and working with my elder Earl is to try and give back for what I've been given in my life. I've been given a lot, so yeah.
Wow. Well, my goodness, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
on the show today and
Thank you.
telling us about these herbs and herbalism. And This has been very enlightening.
Thank you. It's
Thank
been an
you.
honor. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.